Well, welcome. We are joined today by Derek Weeks, Vice President of Sonatype. Welcome.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm glad to be here.
And Derek, please tell our listening audience, what is Sonatype as a company?
Yeah, so Sonatype focuses on automated open source governance within the software development lifecycle. So we help organizations that are doing development today using open source components, understanding whether those components are good or bad. And some of the bad might consist of it has risky license types associated with it, known security vulnerabilities, or just really old, unsupported open source projects that they're using. We also touch on container security and making sure that containers that are moving through the development tool chain are securely configured within the applications that are there. So helping customers better understand kind of what's flowing through their software development lifecycle and keeping that automated so that things can maintain their speed while also maintaining quality.
Oh, great. Yes, another container partner in our ecosystem.
Yeah, you can't have enough. There's a lot happening in containers these days.
Absolutely. And speaking of that, you all did a survey, I guess a DevSecOps survey to over 2,000 participants. Yeah. What were the results of that survey?
Yeah, so we ran the survey again this year. This was our 5th year of running it. We released the results in April, and we found a couple of really interesting things. One is because we've been tracking this year over year, we've asked the question, where are you automating security within your development lifecycle? And no surprise, we've seen more organizations implementing automated security in their development lifecycle. But when they're a DevOps practice, they're actually introducing a lot more automated security than non-DevOps organizations by a factor of anywhere between 10 and 30% more. If you're looking at software, the entire software development lifecycle and where security is being automated throughout the lifecycle, DevOps organizations are 335% more likely to have automated security baked in throughout the lifecycle versus non-DevOps teams. And it's not only just that they're automating security. We ask them, if you are automating security, what are you automating? Okay. Right? What kind of tools are you using? So the big three in this were web application firewalls, ranked number 1. I think there's a lot of legacy leftover network management, network security that plays into that position. Number 2 was container security. Came up number 2 across all organizations, but more specifically the mature DevOps practices. And then number 3 was open source governance related practices within those organizations. So when you're looking at, yes, I've heard we need to build automated security in and throughout the life cycle, but what are other people using? Those are the big 3: WAF, container security, open source governance.
Okay. Wow, I guess security is a hot topic because we all know what happened to Equifax.
Yes.
Can you tell us what lessons that the industry has learned from that?
Yeah, so I'd like to say that Equifax was a wake-up call, but in reality, from the data that we saw from our 2018 survey, it wasn't the wake-up call that everyone needed. Okay. So this year, when we looked at open source related breaches, we asked the question of, have you had or suspected an open source breach within the last 12 months? And that answer went up 50% year over year. So 3 in 10 organizations had or suspected an open source related breach. Now, that might sound like a lot, right? And that might be concerning following Equifax. But if you think 4 years ago, when we heard about Heartbleed, we actually ran our survey in April 2014 when the Heartbleed vulnerability was announced as an open source security vulnerability. During that survey, you would have supposed that all the people answering the survey, because Heartbleed was headline news worldwide, would have said, oh yes, we've had or we suspect an open source related breach. But we've gone up 121% since the Heartbleed vulnerability was announced. And since we've been past Equifax and all the other kind of logoed vulnerabilities out there. So even though it's getting a lot of attention, I don't think it's the wake-up call that everyone expected.
Yes, 121 is kind of high.
Yeah. I wish it was lower, but I think it's just a matter of, we need to be aware and we need to pay attention. And if we start paying attention, then we can start to work on, how do we solve this problem?
And on the pay attention note,
Yeah.
any technologies out there that you're watching that maybe we should pay attention to?
Yeah, so I think the container orchestration technologies in large scale IT environments. So we've all been talking about Docker or various other container technologies, and that was kind of a couple of years ago. But now that people are more comfortable with what the containers are and how to use them, they're trying to deploy containers everywhere. And not just in tens, but hundreds, thousands, or tens of thousands. And I think that in the community of folks that I'm hanging out with, a lot of people are concerned about, yes, we've introduced this ability to scale even more than we have before, but how are those containers configured? Are they secure? What's inside of those? Are we replicating a whole bunch of bad things? So, there's this... I won't remember who actually said it first, and it was probably said decades ago, but when you automate a bad process, you just end up with a lot of bad stuff, right? So you can't just focus on automating. You have to focus on automating, knowing what you're putting together, never passing a known defect downstream, and taking these lessons from kind of modern manufacturing and building quality in from the beginning so that as we scale, we don't scale the level of vulnerabilities that we're facing within an organization, internally as well as externally.
Well, you've just spewed out a bunch of best practices that one should follow to actually become more secure with containers. So we thank you for that education.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Michelle. I appreciate it.
And we appreciate having you at DevNation 2018. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.